Right, welcome to another episode of Stockport Grammar School Talks Sport. Today's guest, it's an exciting one for me because I'm reading his book at the moment, and he's in the Daily Telegraph as well. Welcome aboard, Tim Wigmore. Welcome to Stockport Grammar School Talks Sport.
Oh, hi, Danny. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you for your time. So, first question, really, Tim, is for you to talk a little bit about your journey so far to get to where you are today, really.
So I'm a sports journalist for the Telegraph. I guess journalism is one of those where everyone kind of has a different story. It's probably not like one of those careers where you will go to, you go to a graduate program and stuff. It's a little bit more ad hoc. So yeah, after university, I started writing kind of freelance pieces originally, mostly on cricket, and then I sort of just got into it more and more, and was able to make various moves and steps, and it's a bit of a unorthodox journey for everybody. And I've been with the Telegraph now since 2017, and this is my sort of second main book. So I did, my previous book was called Cricket 2.0, which is on T20 cricket, which came out in 2019. And this book, called The Best: How Elite Athletes Are Made, it's a collaboration with Mark Williams, who's a sports scientist. And the idea really was to write a popular science book combining his lifetime's worth of research really with popular stories, with me doing lots of interviews and stuff. And a book came out last year in the US and UK.
And in terms of touching upon like that sports journalism, have you always had a passion for sport, and what got that passion going for you?
Yeah, no, I always loved sport as a kid. Wasn't particularly good player. I mean, played a bit of cricket and other sports, but wasn't up to a huge amount as a player. But I guess there's so many strands to sport to interest you, from the players to the managers and tactics and all that sort of thing. So yeah, I just always, and the sort of the numbers, and there's just so many little kind of things as a kid you can hook onto, and then the interest kind of grows from there. So yeah, I'm interested in a wide range of sports, probably the main two are football and cricket. But yeah, reasonable interest in other sports as well, and just it's always interesting to see sort of trends in sport, and certain fads, things are going in and out of fashion and stuff. So yeah, I always say you can kind of write on the whole world through sport. You can write on all issues. You can write on science. You can write on gender. You can write on race, and kind of sometimes the bat and ball, or the football, is something to kind of hang all those other ideas on. So you can really, I think it's a great thing to write on, because you actually can explore the whole world through it, and actually writing about different countries and going to different countries as well. So you can actually be very creative with sports writing, which probably not everyone kind of appreciates, but there's some amazing sports writers who just write fantastically, and in a way that actually you can appreciate whether or not you're really into those sports that they write on.
And then a little bit we'll talk about on this series about high performance mindset. And for me, I look at you, and you've obviously must have a high performance mindset because you've got to where you are today. What does high performance mean for you?
Oh, interesting question. I guess ultimately it's not really a sort of a template or whatever, but it's just probably about being the best version of yourself that you can be, and kind of unlocking what's within you. And I think actually in lots of fields, sometimes, it's always good to have people you kind of look up to and even take bits from, but it's also really important, I think, to think about, what is it that you do? What are your strengths and weaknesses? How can you improve those? And actually, things are just work, and life is actually a lot easier when you're not kind of comparing yourself too much. You're just thinking about, I guess, being the best version of yourself that you can be.
And in terms of you personally as well, Tim, what sort of things do you do to make you the best person you can be, in terms of you writing and being the top of the game at the Telegraph, and obviously writing these books as well?
Well, I would say I'm at the top of the game by any means, but I mean, I think fundamental thing for being a good writer, good journalist, is reading a lot. And it's a very obvious thing, but sometimes I get emails from, or people get in touch with me, and I just ask them how much they read, and sometimes they don't say they read very much. And actually, if to read, it's almost the oxygen for your writing, because it's where you get ideas from. It's where you can see patterns. It's where you actually do have understanding of what good writing is and what to aspire to. So actually doing that amount of reading is really important. I think in England, particularly, actually sometimes reading from other countries is a really, really valuable thing. And if you can read a little bit of the American press and so on, you can find find stories there, and even just ways of writing about and thinking about certain sports, which you can maybe transfer over to here. And that's quite good at giving you different perspectives. And reading books, and not just on sport, but on anything, is really good, and just gives you ideas. It just kind of, it keeps you fresh. I think it's very important to also, to read stuff that's not sport, because it helps to give you that perspective and that freshness, rather than feeling like you're kind of stale on the treadmill, which, if you ever feel like that, I think that comes across in your writing very, very quickly. So you want to really avoid that and kind of keep the sense of exploration and kind of adventure in your work as much as possible.
Yeah, no, definitely. And something what hits home there is that you need to have that passion to learn, isn't it? And passion to grow all the time in whatever you're doing, really. I think, and that's really important. Yeah,
and this idea in creative industries, the day you think you've made it is the day you start to fall down. I think that's the idea of kind of constantly finding things to learn about and to develop is really important, rather than just trying to write the same piece again and again, which your imitation of the piece might often just end up being a less good version of the one you did originally, if you're not kind of pushing yourself and trying new things as well.
And then you touched upon a little bit there. You said the American way of writing is different to English way, and obviously other cultures. What sort of things do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, they always say that the headlines in the US are very, very kind of austere and serious, and we have a bit more fun with our headlines. No, it's not so much what I meant. I mean, I think American sports journalism has probably been ahead of English sports journalism in kind of integrating numbers in a really kind of intelligent way, but also like not being like, this is a numbers piece, just kind of using them as evidence, or actually sometimes you can just find a pattern and then you write about, and then you interview people about the pattern. So you're just using it to actually find a great story to tell, and you just tell it in the normal way. I think that's the thing that America often does really well, and we're probably importing that here. And I think also, well, one of the interesting things also in American sports is really interesting is because their regular seasons are so long. So baseball, you have 162 games, and basketball, you have 82. Why it's interesting is because you can't then convince the reader. The readers are not stupid. They know that the game tonight is not going to make or break the season if it's the 37th game in the regular season. So actually, that's, as writers, that pushes them to actually find interesting angles and kind of features to write on, rather than just writing on someone's injury. If someone's an injury out, it probably sort of forces them to a higher standard, whereas and not to kind of go through the motions. Because if you're going through the motions of game 79 of the baseball regular season and you're not even halfway there, it's not going to be interesting to read or to write, actually. So I think in that way it forces writers to be creative, which is good. So I think there's quite a lot that America does really, really well, that I think is also coming into sports writing here as well.
And then talking a little bit about role models on your life and influences, have you got anybody that stands out who've influenced you quite a lot, and why?
Yeah, I think journalism is kind of one of those things where there's always like writers that you like and stuff, but there's not, I wouldn't say there's one or two that were kind of dominant. I mean, in terms of sports writers generally now, I mean, Wright Thompson, the American writer, is an unbelievably good storyteller, and what he does, he spends like a couple of months on doing these kind of long form pieces, and then the storytelling is just incredible. So yeah, as a kind of writer, he's right up there. But he wasn't I didn't really know about him until until my 20s. So it wasn't like a role model when I was a kid.
In terms of your journey so far, it's like a roller coaster, it's up and down, and people have setbacks. Have you got any setbacks that stick out in your head, and how did you overcome them?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've had tons of jobs that I've applied for and I haven't got, and that's kind of just part of it. And I mean, that's true, I think, of almost all journalists. So you kind of, in that way, it filters out people who don't have the determination, I think, in some ways. So that, just trying to kind of, learn from those bad experiences is clearly a thing. And then in terms of, and there's always a thing where you write a piece and then you read it the next day or something, and you kind of wince a bit, and that could have been better and stuff. And then sometimes there's nothing you can do, but other times you can actually think, well, if I was in that position again, what would I do differently? And Yeah, I mean, obviously, writing on deadline, it always brings a lot of stresses, and you kind of, yeah, there's always things you could have done differently. I think you almost have to write on deadline. You always have to do an element of planning in advance about how you're going to approach the situation. Then you don't know what's going to be. You can probably do things to prepare yourself as well as possible, rather than kind of. I've had a few times where I've kind of the team that's winning has changed late, and it's been like, oh my god, I have to rip everything up and start again. So yeah, but I mean, that's also part of the thrill of it, and there's also part of, like, you kind of have to roll with it at times. So there's things you can do to improve, but there's not like a formula. I think if you get too formulaic with your journalism, that's actually that's a pitfall, something to be avoided.
Yeah. So I'm guessing, writing on the probably 1999 European Cup final, Bayern Munich, Manchester United, as a journalist, that must have been horrendous, because obviously writing it, Bayern Munich have got the name on the trophy on 91 minutes, and then would you have to write a whole new story and get that deadline in?
Yeah, no, I've heard some horror stories about that game. I mean, yeah, especially with printing presses and stuff, like, it's just brutal, and like, yeah, you can't really. I suppose now we're moving towards a digital era that actually makes that a little bit better. Although there's a demand to copy as quickly as possible, it might be a case that you can have your first paragraphs up, and then you can add to it and improve it, but rather than having that thing and then it's just there. So yeah, there's kind of I mean, I suppose doing an election would be the nearest to.
Yeah.
I don't know, so there was that famous US headline 1948 when the Dewey-Truman election, where the headline was Dewey beats Truman, and of course Truman won that election, and he posed with the headline the following day. So that's probably their equivalent of Champions League '99. Yeah.
And then on the flip side, like, there's loads of accomplishments you've achieved in your life so far, and there's probably more to come, definitely. But at the moment, what are you most proud of, Tim, and why?
Probably, I mean, in some ways, the books I've done, because writing a book it does feel like an achievement, and it feels like you kind of you learn a lot, and especially for the recent book I did the best. But you learn so much in kind of writing down. It's hard to explain, but it kind of forces you to find out the stuff that you don't know. I often find actually that when I'm writing do I really find out the gaps in my knowledge, and that's one of the great things about in general, that you feel like you're always learning, which is great. And I know some other jobs people just feel like every day is the same and kind of going through the motions a bit. And I think as a journalist, you have to have that curiosity and actually just want to find that question of why. I think really should kind of inform all your work. I think that's a real hallmark of the best journalists.
No, that's good. I think that's not just, I don't think it's just a journalist, that curiosity. I think it's any walk of life that whatever you do, you want that curiosity, you want to get better, you want to learn, because like I say, it can become boring, and for me, mental health then starts to suffer, I think. So I think it's really, really important. And then we're asking this question to everybody, but what are Tim's 3 non-negotiable behaviours that you would expect from yourself or anybody else you come into contact with?
Okay, number 1 actually is very simple. Is do your fact checking, because if you have stuff that's wrong, well, everything else can be perfect, but if the facts are wrong, when everything else it falls apart. It's a bit like a Jenga game of Jenga. That one paragraph can set up your argument beautifully, and you can write brilliantly everything else. But if that paragraph turns out to be wrong, well, then everything else falls apart, and the whole piece is worthless. Second one's really a bit silly, but like, I find to read my stuff before I send it in different formats is so important. So by that I mean, like, I use this thing called Scrivener, which to write, which is a great tool for organizing everything. But then I copy it into Gmail, and then I read it again. It's amazing how many times I find mistakes or repeated words is the most. When it's a word that's, one of those words that you can use once and it's good, but use it twice and people will remember it, that kind of stuff. And actually, it's only by having it on that different background that I'm like, I found all these things. And actually, sometimes that can be so important to improving that. That's really, really important as well. And yeah, just the third is just to think, yeah, how can I make this piece better? How can I make sure I'm not doing this on autopilot? I think so much of when journalists aren't at their best, it's because they do pieces on autopilot, and you kind of just wing it a little, not winging it, but you can kind of in your sleep, you can do a 6 out of 10 piece, and actually kind of, or like trying to push yourself so you never think that's okay, to just do what's okay, and you just you find ways to just keep that kind of spark in and make it not just seem like a generic piece that and actually a different piece to what everyone else is going to write. And yeah, I think that's really important as well.
And then last question for me is, if you could go back to being a 12-year-old boy at school again, what advice would you give yourself knowing what you know now?
I suppose it's quite simple, but it's sport actually, I think it's a really important one, where if you're not the best at sport, sometimes there's a kind of thing where like trying and failing is bad, and it's almost easier to just stay away from the fray and not enter, and actually just, you know, trying to do just putting yourself there into a few more other sport, you know, and actually just not having that fear of failure would probably be one, you know, in terms of, is there another sport you can try? You know, you might be rubbish, but like, so what? Who cares? I think that would be, that would probably be the one, I think. Any
aspiring sports journalists out there, what piece of advice would you give to those people who are thinking, you know what, I'm thinking of this as a career? What words of wisdom would you give them?
Well, so one really important thing is that, like, we obviously know journalism is changing quickly. So it's not about thinking, what can I do kind of now? It's about actually, what can I do to put myself in the best position in what the industry will look like in 5 years time or something. So that's sort of what I did in a few different ways. So the big one for me is T20 cricket is like the most popular format of cricket, and it's clearly that it's growing massively and stuff. But until actually even now, but especially until sort of 5 years ago, it wasn't really taken seriously or written about in a particularly kind of intelligent way, actually. And it was also because the guys who were people who were correspondents and so on, you know, they had generally been correspondents since before T20 was even created. So you have this new sport with these new rules, and people are kind of looking at it through this old prism. So it was pretty clear, actually, that there was going to be a growing need for people who could write on T20 in a really interesting way. Yeah. And actually, so that was with hindsight, quite an obvious thing. So actually, if you're is there a sport you really like, and is there an area of it that's growing? Well, I always think it's really intelligent to kind of find a growing area and make yourself a bit of a specialist in it. So, you know, in football now, for example, women's football, clearly is growing, and it seems, you know, will continue to grow. So actually, you know, if you're an 18-year-old journalist now, whatever, trying to carve a niche in women's football and make yourself a real expert on it puts you in a very good position potentially in 3 or 4 years time. And I think it's just really important, basically, to do pieces that aren't just kind of imitations of what the kind of correspondents are doing, but do pieces that are different. So actually, that's going out there, and so rather than kind of watching like Man United on TV and writing a report on it, which there's millions of those, and your pieces stand out. It's is there a different story? Can you go out and find a local, you know, it can be a non-league team or something, but at least that's a unique story which not everyone is telling, and that's kind of there's a worth to that, really. And I think so not just saying I want to do the Champions League matches from home. I mean, that's really not a great use of your time, to be honest. So it's where can I find those untold stories? And my simple rules always, you know, what would I like to read that no one else has written? And that's generally, if it interests you, it'll probably interest someone else as well.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. I like that. What's next? What's next for you, Tim? What's the future hold?
Well, I'm with the Telegraph, and we have a very busy year, which COVID dependent will culminate in heading to Australia for the But yeah, the best laid plans and all that. I was meant to go. So my trip to Sri Lanka was cursed. So I actually went last year. I went for 2 days, and then the tour got cancelled and had to fly back immediately, which was a bit like out of a film. You know, everyone in masks and everyone at the airport, very, very weird. And then this year I was meant to go to Sri Lanka as well for the rearranged tour, and then the government, Sri Lankan government, refused to allow any journalists to come over and get visas. So I was meant to go kind of twice to see the matches there. Ended up seeing them on no occasion. So it might sadly be a lot more of watching cricket from home, just generally for young journalists. I think, it's finding those. Yeah, what can you do that's fresh and a little different? And actually, I mean, a good example of this, I think there was last few years there've been some David Priest and some other writers writing on goalkeepers specifically, which is interesting. That's something that no one ever really did before, and then he's kind of owned that space very, in a very smart way. So I always think, finding those areas is always which you think are interesting and being a bit underreported. That's always a great way to go.